The July 2022 Unfound Newsletter. Yep, it's July. Who would have thunk it? We are officially halfway through the year 2022. What this also means is that 1 month from now, somebody turns 52. Yep, 52. And really, I'm loving my 50s. Seriously. So many good things have happened in the last 2 years despite COVID and whatever other earthly things have occurred. And this year, 2022, has been especially good. Unfound has expanded and grown and matured in ways I couldn't have thought possible a year ago. Seriously, so it's all good. Dad is good. He's in Pennsylvania. I'm in Florida, which is the way it probably should be. The rest of my family, Brian, Diane, Michael, and niece and nephews are all good. In fact, my nephew John is getting married in September right here in Florida. That will officially make me the only non-married person in my family who is adult age. And I love it. Let's start where I always do. Upcoming cases. July 8th, Craig Freer revisited. July 15th, Belinda Brewster. I can't make a prediction further than that because I have a week-long disc golf tournament from July 12th to the 16th in Illinois. So I'm not sure what that next Friday, July 22nd, will be. We shall see. Other disappearances I'm working on. Chase Lackey, Brian Kletcha, Diana Alejandre, Kelly Gaskins, Ginny Wood, Irvin Williams. Those are all together, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Michaela Bally. Once again, more on this disappearance later. Bonnie Hutton. First topic for this newsletter is education. Right now, right as I'm typing this or saying this, I'm in the process of having an excellent back and forth with a citizen sleuth who's gotten deep into a disappearance that I'm not going to mention, so as to keep this person's identity a secret. And don't bother looking at the above list. The disappearance isn't on there. Hey, I know how curious you all are. But this conversation she and I are having through Messenger is very enlightening to me, and I hope it's enlightening to her. Why is it enlightening to me? Well, I don't have too much interaction with amateur sleuths, especially ones who have gotten as deep into a disappearance as she has with this one. She has sent me a large doc file with links and all sorts of things. And by the way, this all came from a post I put on a Facebook page desiring to talk to someone in this missing person's family. The family hasn't contacted me yet, but she has. It's enlightening because given that I cover a different disappearance every week, I can sometimes forget that there are people who privately work on one disappearance over and over and over. They're amateurs, they have other jobs, they may have never looked into another disappearance before, but for some reason a missing person case catches their attention, and before they know it, they've compiled gigabytes of information. Fascinating. Now, you all know I love this. I love the public getting involved. I love amateurs becoming part of the process instead of just sitting on their couches waiting for their next episode every Friday. I want people to start looking at maps and getting newspaper.com memberships and subscribing to an online database, all of that. I love it. I believe the public in this way can have a positive impact. For me, before I started Unfound, although I was always interested in disappearances, I would never say I ever made a disappearance mine. A collection of different mysteries interested me. Jody Huisentruit, Jennifer Kesse, the murder of Dan Markel, the murder of Osti Davidson, which turned out to be a case of mistaken identity, and there were a bunch more. So I would not say I ever became obsessed on any one case. My obsession was mysteries in general, and I now get to fulfill that obsession with Unfound. Anyway, she's doing good work, lots of information, organized, precise, And there's nothing in my interaction with her that tells me she's gotten weird like many people have gotten with Tom Brown's and Mari Murray's disappearances. Meaning I get no sense she has staked out her position and would attack anybody with a different point of view. However, yes, you knew it was coming. My messages with her have started to put into focus something that I think I need to start conveying to all of you and the rest of the listeners should you also want to do what this woman is doing. And right now, on June 30th, the following is what I'm trying to teach her. What is that? Well, with any one disappearance, I'm not an expert. I'm not going to know as much about Susie Lyle's disappearance as her mother Mary does. I'm not going to know as much as Caroline Lowe knows about Jodi Huisentruit's disappearance. For the most recent disappearance, I'm never going to know all the particulars of Holly White's case like Elaine Graves does. Why? Because I cover a different disappearance every week. Instead, what I provide to people who only know about their own disappearances is the overall picture. I have 250 disappearances bouncing around in my head, about 10% of which have been solved to one extent or another. I keep track of all of this and pass it along to the guests and others, anybody who wants to know. So the way it works is they know everything about a particular disappearance, and I know the generalities of 250. Thus, they give me the facts of their disappearances, and in return, I interpret those facts by knowing about disappearances that are similar. And it's that last point that amateurs miss. People who become interested in one particular disappearance do not have enough knowledge about similar ones so as to compare and contrast. And my perception is that it never occurs to them that comparing and contrasting should be part of their process. Maybe not the first step, maybe not the second step, but it should certainly be in the top 20. Why is this important? Well, this is something else that citizen sleuths don't understand. At some point, there are no more facts in the public sphere to gather. At some point, all the videos have been watched, all the pings and messages have been analyzed, all the people have been interrogated. There just doesn't seem to be any more trail to follow. Why is this a problem? Because facts are usually, for the most part, what guide investigations, gathering them, then analyzing them. Then what happens? My perception, these sleuths keep going over the same facts over and over and over as if they're missing something, when probably they haven't. Of course, this frustrates them, and seldom can they progress past this point. What then follows is endless theorizing, and the important analysis stops. Why? Because they don't think there's anything else to analyze. They've hit a dead end. There's nowhere to turn. But there is. All those other disappearances that have been solved that are like the one they have been working on. These can be a valuable resource. Granted, no two disappearances are exactly alike. However, I think I've shown over and over on Unfound how there are only a limited number of different kinds of disappearances, maybe 6 at the most. It's all just a matter of what happened in this one could have happened in this one and that one. Where would it take us if we do what they did to solve that disappearance 10 years ago? So knowing other disappearances, especially solved ones, like the one you're working on, can be very helpful. The other point about not knowing other disappearances is that they can keep you realistic. I should say that again. The other point about knowing other disappearances is that they can keep you realistic as to what actually happened. Too often I see amateurs automatically going to, it was foul play, when there are no facts to support that. I see that in the discussion group on Facebook. Almost always the voters pick the foul play choice. Whereas in the think tank, where we get very in-depth and talk through the different possibilities, we come to non-foul play conclusions much more than the discussion group probably ever will. Why is that? Hard to say. Probably, though, because it's a mystery, so people automatically think there had to be some kind of human manipulation. That there's no way a mystery could be created by accident. However, when people are actually asked point blank about how they think the human manipulation occurred, then this causes them to think through the sensibility of their beliefs. And that's many times where foul play theories start to fall apart. But in this process, I've discovered 2 rules that I think I will be adding to my college presentations this fall. These will be ones regarding how to make a decision whether a disappearance had foul play as a factor or not. These 2 rules are based on the facts of the 250 disappearances Unfound has covered to this point. The first point, actual signs of violence or facts that show something happened. Examples, Tyler North, truck burned. Dorianne Myers, house and car burned. Jody Husentrut, stuff strewn all over the parking lot. Zoe Campos, some guy driving her car days later. And of course, there are many, many more disappearances like this that we've covered on Unfound. The number 2 point is that people who are very close to the missing person telling stories that don't make sense, and these people are not drug addicts. Angela Green, husband says he put her in a mental hospital and he never showed any proof of that. Marion Hasley, husband told different stories, including one in which she got in a white truck with somebody and left. Vanessa Van Oren, boyfriend said she got in a truck with 2 men he didn't know and left. Laverta Sorrell, husband claimed he dropped her off at her work despite her work not being open at that time. Stuff like that. And once again, many, many unfound disappearances like these. If one of those 2 above criteria are not met, then I think the chances of a disappearance the chances of a disappearance involving foul play is very, very low. Not zero, nothing is zero until a case is solved. However, these 2 criteria can be an excellent guide for myself and all of you. Overall, what I'm saying is that although I may know a lot more than any of you regarding disappearances, I want you to know that I learned how to alter my teachings and add to my teaching by observing how all of you go about studying disappearances. So in that way, I think this is a 2-way relationship. We are both learning things. I hope to continue to correspond with this citizen investigator on the work she is doing. In fact, I plan to respond to her after I complete a few more words in this newsletter. Next topic, old talks. As you saw at the top of this newsletter, I had more on this later next to 2 disappearances that are on the list. Why is that? I should probably start the answer here. For a long time, I've kept a record of every person I've ever spoken to and the disappearances that one time or another I had aspirations to cover. As you can imagine, it's a long list and it goes way back to like 2017. Anytime I speak to someone about a disappearance, the missing person's name and the name of the contact goes on that list. And when that disappearance is covered on Unfound, I highlight the case in green. Likewise, should an interview fall through or the person stops taking any calls, eventually those names get highlighted in red, along with an explanation as to why they're in red. Then there are the names that never get highlighted in either color. Why? A few reasons that could be one or a few of the following. Just not enough information to put together an episode yet. Bad time for the main contact to get emotionally ready to do an interview. I want to try to see if I can do some further investigating by contacting some original witnesses. A good example would be what I did in 2019 for the Cameron Remmer disappearance. And what's tough is sometimes these particular cases on the list can get overrun by the newer disappearances I take on. Eventually, I feel further and further disconnected from these disappearances that I wanted to cover in 2017 or 2018 but never did. So over the last couple of years, I've made it a point to once in a while contact some of those original people to see if anything has changed. Any new people to contact, any new information. How are these family members doing in their lives? Are they ready to do interviews now? I'm happy to say this has been a positive experience so far. However, it's also been a little strange. Why? The strangest has nothing to do with any of the people contacted. They are fantastic. If nothing else, they are happy I have not forgotten about them or their missing loved ones. As I tell them, hey, I keep a list of every disappearance that comes close to me. But the process has been a little strange because it has caused me to think about the distant past of Unfound. Well, a distant, mainly 2017 into 2018. I, of course, was living in a totally different apartment. I had only featured maybe 30 disappearances when I first spoke to these people. 30. It's almost kind of funny now, given that there were now to almost 260 disappearances, whereas the time gone. And so, in a way, it's like a little bit of an out-of-body experience. Like, oh yeah, there was a time when I had only covered 10 disappearances, when Unfound was only getting maybe 1,000 downloads a week, and there were only 100 people in the discussion group on Facebook, and there was no website, there was no live show, there were no assistants, there were no speaking engagements. That was how it was when I last spoke to these people. Now, it's all this, including this newsletter, which didn't exist back then. Most importantly, I can already tell by talking to some of these people that due to my enormous amount of experience now, my opinion on these disappearances have changed at least a bit. No, I'm not going to get into any specifics now, of course not. But really, back at that time, let's just say in 2017, I wasn't much different from the citizen sleuth I discussed in the previous section. Passionate, eager, engaged, resourceful, but also naive, green, inexperienced, and I didn't know what I didn't know. Because of this, I certainly got some points wrong, and I'm trying to correct those as I begin to re-educate myself on these disappearances so that I can become a good interviewer when the time comes. I'll go even further on this topic. Thinking back to that time, I can remember many of these original conversations. My mind works like that. I don't have a photographic memory, not at all, but my brain does seem to remember the most important parts from all conversations, not just unfound ones. But I remember these talks. I remember wanting to have these people on the podcast, but I can also remember thinking, will the podcast even be around by that time? Hey, podcasting is a tough gig. It's a grind. It's not all unicorns and rainbows. Unfound had horrible reviews at the time, mostly due to trolls and bitter fellow podcasters. There was no Patreon, no YouTube ad money, nothing. Yes, I wouldn't say I was living week to week, but those days were some dark times. When did that change? I would say in 2018. Frankly, the whole hubbub with Tom Brown's disappearance was it finally showed me that there was a place for Unfound if I could stick it out. My mother then died, and there was some money that came from that. Then in 2019, everything really started to come together. But back in 2017 into early 2018, when I first spoke to these people, I wasn't sure what the next month would bring. And you couldn't even tell back then, could you? Hey, I never want to let anyone see me sweat. Now there's no turning back. There's so many good things going on that the podcast has a kind of momentum of its own. Even if I wanted to stop it, which I don't, I get the feeling it would take on some sort of artificial intelligence and the computers would work on their own or something. So yes, if you looked at the list, the disappearance of Michaela Bally and Kelly Gaskins, Jenny Wood, Irvin Williams, who all disappeared seemingly together, are surely in our future. When? My guess is late this month at the earliest. Final topic, the audio live show. How is that working for everyone? Yes, I know many of you tune in to what is now the Monday live show when it actually plays live on YouTube. So you may not even bother listening to the audio version that now comes out the next morning on the same feed as the regular podcast. But for everyone else, how has it been? The downloads so far have been pretty good. Yes, right now, a month in, there does seem to be a little bit of cannibalization going on. However, there's no reason to believe that this is a long-term thing. What do I mean? As everybody knows, the long-running podcast comes out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And the live show, in its new slot, occurs on Monday nights, and the audio version comes out sometime every Tuesday, usually in the late morning. Meaning, there are approximately 4 days, 96 hours between the release of the podcast and the release of the live show. Or if you wanted to look at it the other way, there are 72 hours between the release of the live show on Tuesday and the podcast on Friday. What this means is if somebody doesn't listen to the Friday podcast by Tuesday morning, when the person goes to his or her feed, the first thing that listener will see is not the Friday podcast, which hasn't been listened to yet. Instead, at the top of the list will be the live show from that Tuesday. Likewise, if somebody hasn't listened to the audio live show by the time the podcast comes out on Friday, then the show at the top of the list will be the Friday podcast and not the live show. What that induces is people then could only start listening to whatever is at the top of the podcast list instead of recognizing they missed something that was posted a couple days ago. Of course, the way to keep this from happening is for everyone to listen to each as quickly as they can when each comes out. If only. But I have no control over that. All of you have lots of things going on, and you get to your podcasts and Disney Plus shows and everything else when you can. Really, I think this will eventually change. We're only a month in. It's the first summer since 2019 where people can get out unrestricted by the bounds of COVID, so I'm not sure podcasts are on everyone's minds. What I'm saying is we podcasters don't have a captive audience anymore, which is fine. It's good. Everything is pretty much back to normal, except for gas, inflation, Ukraine, etc. Don't get me started. The ultimate idea, which will probably be enacted come the beginning of September, is to put the live show on its very own feed. Meaning if people want to listen to it, they'll have to subscribe to it. Whereas right now everybody gets the live show because they are subscribed to the original podcast. It was automatic. Come September, this will change. Will downloads for the live show drop? Probably. Do I care? Not sure. All I know is the live show should have been turned into an audio show a long time ago. And putting it on the same feed has allowed new people to hear it. Hopefully some of those people will subscribe to it when the live show becomes its own thing on Spotify and everywhere else. Either way, whatever happens, the live show isn't going away. I love it, and the people who have been partaking it on YouTube for almost 5 years love it too. That's all I have for this month. Thanks for the support, and thanks for listening and reading.